Why does the US seem to have an overfixation on race? The entire planet is. India is racist just between fellow countrymen. Asians are often extremely racist. Again, not just against non-Asians but between themselves. Italians will call Spaniards dirty, and both are known for racist actions against Indians and blacks. Every place has racism. Now, those working to overcome these problems have to bring them to light. This exposes racism. Because the powers that be want us fighting and thus distracted. Because race and race topics are openly spoken in America. You think race doesn't matter in Europe or say Asia. You think Europeans aren't racists but won't admit or talk about it as publicly as American media? Ask Libyans, Argelinos, Roma, Moroccans, Syrians, Latin Americans et al. How do they feel about racism in Europe? In Asia? Go ask Filipinos in Japan. Korea. How do they feel about racism? Ask them about racism in the Middle East. All these places are extremely racist as well, but you won't hear about it on the news or publicly the same way you hear about it in America. America has a race problem, yes. But we openly speak about it and try to address it, whether successfully or not. If you're in Europe, Asia or MENA, ask yourself, why isn't it a topic that they speak about publicly? Racial issues are talked about more openly because ethnic minorities fought very hard to get any semblance of equal treatment, so there's more precedent and context to discuss inequality now. Seam. Overfixation. Well, those are your two main problems. The US doesn't seem to have a fixation. It does. Because the utilization of race ideology was a massive foundation of their founding history. Lawmaking, land use, territory wars, for a little over 200 years. And overfixation? Well, once you know the massive depth of history involved, spanning lawmaking trends all the way from one-drop rule to affirmative action, much of which has been omitted or only written about from a colonizer, missionary, conquistador, religious fundamentalist, purist perspective, you'd gather that they are exactly as fixated as to be expected on what still even tangentially affects individuals on a national scale, instead of a personal one, such as a subjective personal experience of racism, like being called a slur, which is different from a systemic outlook like biased laws and redlining as forms of legislative racism. The correct question is, why does the media seem to have an overfixation on race? The United States has a complex history with regard to race, which has contributed to the ongoing focus and discussions surrounding it. Several factors have contributed to the prominence of race as a topic in American society. Historical context. The United States has a history of slavery and racial discrimination that has had enduring effects on the country. Slavery was deeply ingrained in the nation's early years, and even after its abolition, racial segregation and discrimination persisted through Jim Crow laws and practices. These historical injustices have had a lasting impact on race relations and continue to shape social, economic, and political dynamics in the present. Civil rights movement. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s played a significant role in raising awareness of racial inequalities and challenging discriminatory practices. The movement brought issues of racial justice to the forefront of public consciousness, and its legacy continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about race. Demographic diversity. The United States is a diverse country with people from various racial and ethnic backgrounds. This diversity, combined with the legacy of racial discrimination, has created ongoing challenges and discussions surrounding racial identity, representation, and equal opportunities. Systemic disparities. Despite progress made since the civil rights movement, racial disparities persist in many areas of American society, including education, employment, housing, and criminal justice. These disparities contribute to ongoing conversations about race as people seek to address and rectify these inequalities. Media and social media influence. The media plays a significant role in shaping public discourse, and discussions about race often receive extensive coverage. Social media platforms have also provided a space for people to share their experiences and amplify conversations about race. It is important to note that while discussions about race may be more prominent in the United States, it does not mean that other countries are devoid of racial issues or discussions. Racial dynamics and the level of emphasis on race can vary between countries due to their unique historical, cultural, and social contexts. As somebody who has lived in both, Europe does actually make just as big a deal about race as Americans do. The media just doesn't hype over it like it does in the US. The most openly racist people I ever met were in Western and Northern Europe, so before you criticize the US, make sure you check the mirror thoroughly. Y'all aren't that different in that category. That's not true. Crime news here in my corner of Europe regularly use race as descriptor. It's just that most countries around here are overwhelmingly white people populated. But you'll regularly hear things like, suspect is gender, / rough age, / white, Romani, black, Asian. Yes, it's talked about more in the US, but it's not like it doesn't happen over here at all. So get off your high horse. Bruh, you being serious? Slavery? Jim Crow? Segregation? Chinese Exclusion Act? Japanese internment? FBI COINTELPRO? FBI assassinations of Black Panthers, others. Native Americans genocide? Screwing over Puerto Rico? Voter suppression? Fear of Mexicans, illegals taking your job, and more. We have a long history that continues to this day of targeting minorities. It's an American tradition thoroughly embraced by the right. Without the fear of the other, the GOP wouldn't be nearly as popular. Because if you factor in the reality that indigenous and African people constitute multiple, different races and cultures, there have been dozens of racially motivated genocides on US soil. Kinda hard to be normal about race after that, you know? Because the time you are using on thinking about some people because of their skin color and culture is not used on questioning the acts of rich people who think themselves above the laws. The media. Too much money and power to be had by dividing our nation along imaginary lines. Ever notice how the largest voices advocating for divides along racial lines always have books to sell? Ask an American would probably be a better place to ask this question up. The US media has an overfixation on race because conflict sells. It's funny because other countries such as in Europe are far more racist than the USA. People in the USA think it only exists here, but it's far worse around the world. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the US is the most diverse country like ever. So there is going to be conflict. Many people think that if you just stop talking about race and racial issues, it will just go away. However, in order to fix a problem, it needs to be addressed head-on. Of course, there are many more factors, including the rich using it as a distraction while they rob us blind. Race is more prevalent in America and the UK as it was a driving force in chattel slavery, which lasted 400 American years in American history of America. Our laws were built around keeping slaves in America, slaves and white people. In America. At the top of wealth and prosperity. In America. I always assumed it was to get people to vote against their own interests.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. TooAfraidToAsk is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.